The afternoon I walked between two armies and silenced every wolf on the battlefield. I wasn't thinking about power or prophecy or the ancient bloodline sleeping in my veins. I was thinking about a broken table repaired twice, once with clamps fashioned from a bent candelabra, once by a carpenter who charged me 2 bread rolls for the job, both times by hands that refused to accept the damage as permanent, both times with the stubborn belief that broken things deserve the effort of repair. But the table comes later. And so does the silence. Let me start with the morning after everything fell apart for the second time, and the discovery that healing, like all honest work, requires the one thing I have never been good at: patience. My name is Brielle Thane. 2 things you need to know. First, I'm the last living descendant of the Ashenmore pack, an ancient bloodline that could calm, suppress, or command any wolf alive. My mother hid what she was for 20 years. The wolves who destroyed her people have been hunting survivors ever since. They're burning villages in the east, and they're coming for me. Second, I'm in love with the Alpha King of the Ravencrest Dominion, a man whose wolf nearly consumed him, who hadn't spoken in 11 months until I stumbled into his chamber and fell asleep on his chest, who communicates through repaired furniture and wool socks and a door gap measured in inches, whose trust I shattered by telling him the truth about my blood, that the miracle between us might be genetics rather than choice. His wolf came back. The furniture didn't survive, and the door that had been opening wider every day closed to 3 inches, then grew to 4. Now I was rebuilding, 1 inch at a time, because there's an old saying in Dunhallow, a river that's been dammed will find its way back to the sea. It just takes longer. I intended to be the river. Day 1 of the rebuild, I brought breakfast, not from the kitchens. Dagna would have objected to unauthorized food transport, and honestly, after everything that had happened, getting reprimanded for bread theft felt like a manageable problem. I took it from my own ration: a roll, some dried fruit, a piece of cheese that was optimistic about its remaining shelf life. I placed it on a cloth beside the 4-inch gap and sat down on the antechamber floor. "Good morning," I said. "The cheese is questionable but well-intentioned. The bread is yesterday's, which means it's achieved the structural integrity of a building material. You could repair furniture with it. Might be more effective than candelabra clamps." Silence. Breathing. That deep, resonant vibration behind the door. The sound I'd learned to read the way other people read facial expressions. "I'm gonna clean the antechamber now," I said. "Not because it needs it, although it does. Spectacularly, but because I need something to do with my hands while I sit out here and wait for you to decide whether I'm worth 4.5 inches. I cleaned. 4 hours. The same work I'd done on my first day. Sweeping shattered furniture, scrubbing claw marks, cataloging damage. The meditation of physical labor. The patience of a woman who had learned that the most important things in the Ironhold Citadel happened slowly. When I left that evening, the food was gone. The gap was still 4 inches. My grandmother used to say, "Don't count the fruit while the tree is still growing." So I didn't count. I just watered. Day 2. I brought more food and talked about the weather. About Tessa's ongoing diplomatic campaign against the kitchen staff for better bread, about the sentries in the corridor who had started placing bets on whether the gap would grow or shrink. "The tall one, Harlan, has 3 coppers on wider by Thursday," I said. "The short one, I think his name is Bryn, but I might be inventing that, has 2 coppers on she gets eaten by Tuesday. I find his lack of faith personally offensive but financially understandable." A rumble. Low. Faint. The first sound from behind the door since the confession. My heart stopped. Restarted. Resumed at an inadvisable pace. "Hello again," I whispered. Then louder. "I mean, good." "Fine. A rumble is fine. I'll take a rumble. Rumbles are our foundational language. We built this entire relationship on rumbles and broken furniture, and honestly, that's more than most people start with. The gap didn't grow, but the rumble had happened. Day 2 was a victory measured in vibrations. Day 3, I arrived at the antechamber and found something beside the door. Not socks, not a blanket, a piece of wood, splintered, familiar. One half of the table he'd broken during the confession. The table repaired once before with candelabra clamps. The table that had survived everything his wolf had done until it couldn't survive what I'd done. One broken half. Placed with intention, the split edge facing upward, the scar visible. He was showing me the damage, saying, with the only language available, "This is what happened. This is what's left. This is what I can give you right now." I picked it up, turned it in my hands, ran my fingers along the fracture line, the place where the wood had given way, not from force alone, but from the accumulated weight of being broken and repaired and broken again until the material simply couldn't hold. There's a saying among carpenters, wood remembers every wound. This wood remembered all of them. I carried the half table to the Citadel carpenter, a wiry old wolf named Garin who worked in a basement workshop smelling of sawdust and quiet competence. "Can you fix this?" I asked. He examined the break. "This has been repaired before. Clamps improvised, crude but functional." He traced the wood grain. "What keeps breaking it?" Complicated question. Furniture shouldn't have complicated questions. This furniture does. He repaired it. Properly. Glue, dowels, sanding, the kind of work that respects the material rather than just forcing it together. The split remained visible. A pale line to the dark wood, like a scar through skin. But the joint was solid. "It'll hold," Garin said. "But whatever keeps breaking it, the wood won't survive another break. There's a limit to how many times you can shatter a thing and expect it to come back." "I know," I said. "That's why this time it needs to be done right." I paid him with 2 bread rolls from my ration. He accepted them with the expression of a man who had stopped asking questions about the West Wing. Day 4, I left the repaired half beside the gap. "Fixed," I said through the door. "Properly this time, by someone who actually knows what they're doing, unlike the last repair, which, and I say this with full respect for your improvisational engineering, looked like it had been performed by an ambitious raccoon." When I arrived on day 5, the second half was beside the door. He'd given me both pieces, both halves of the damage, trusting me with the complete wreckage of what had broken between us. I took it to Garin. He fixed it without comment. I carried the complete tabletop back to the antechamber and set it against the wall. That evening, the gap was 6 inches, and I understood something about healing that no one had ever explained to me. You can't fix a broken thing alone. One person can hold the pieces, but it takes 2 to fit them together. One on each side of the fracture, each holding their half, each trusting the other to meet in the middle. The table was a conversation, the most honest one we'd ever had. On day 6, I visited Lord Aldrich Morn in the detention wing. Rurik authorized it with the expression of a man who disapproved completely but trusted my reasons, which was generous, considering I hadn't fully explained them. I'd like to tell you the visit was a carefully considered strategic decision born from mature reflection. In reality, Tessa had been digging through the Citadel archives for more information about Ashenmore, beyond the bloodline flag she'd already uncovered, but every relevant document had been removed, filed, or destroyed. The only person who knew the full truth was sitting in a cell, and he demonstrated a willingness to trade information when it served his purposes. The detention wing was cold, dim, and architecturally committed to making its occupants feel like afterthoughts. Morin's cell was larger than most, a concession to his former rank, but still unmistakably a cage. "Miss Thane," he didn't stand. "I expected you sooner. I've been busy." "Furniture repair." "Ah?" A slight smile. "How is the Alpha?" "Improving. No thanks to you, entirely thanks to me." He folded his hands. "Who arranged your transfer?" Who positioned you in the West Wing? Who ensured the one person capable of stabilizing the Alpha was placed within proximity? I saved him, Miss Thane. The method was imperfect. The intention was sound. Your intention was to use me as a leash. My intention was to preserve the Dominion. The Alpha was deteriorating. 3 women had been destroyed. Then intelligence arrived. Ashenmore bloodline indicator, Eastern settlements, a girl with a dead mother and a living lineage. He shrugged. I acted. History judges the result, not the motive. History hasn't finished judging yet. I sat across from him. The iron table between us was bolted to the floor. Apparently the detention wing had learned from experience about furniture mobility. Tell me about the old king's death, I said. Tell me what Kaelin's father was protecting. Morin studied me. The calculation behind his eyes was familiar, determining what to trade and what to withhold, running the ledger of power even from a cage. A snake sheds its skin but keeps its teeth. Morin would be dangerous until his last breath. The old king received a woman, he said. 23 years ago, an Ashenmore woman, heavily pregnant, fleeing the purge that had destroyed her pack. She came to the Citadel seeking protection. The king, who honored an ancient pact between the Voss bloodline and the Ashenmore, took her in. My mother, pregnant with me. The hunters followed. 60 wolves sanctioned by a continental coalition that had decided Ashenmore power was too dangerous to exist. His voice was clinical, reportorial. The old king refused to surrender her. He held the eastern gate while she escaped through the service tunnels. And they killed him. He killed 9 of them first. Then yes. Morin paused. The official record says hunting accident. The actual record says the Alpha King of the Ravencrest Dominion died protecting an Ashenmore woman carrying an Ashenmore child. Where did she go? East. A farming settlement. Dunhallow. He let the name settle. Where she lived quietly for 6 years, raised her daughter, died of a fever that may or may not have been natural, and left behind a child who had no idea what she was. Until you sent a tax collector. Until I recognized an opportunity to recover what the old king died to protect. He leaned forward. The pact between Voss and Ashenmore wasn't sentimental. An Alpha bonded to a mediator is the most powerful political unit on the continent. The old king knew that. His son doesn't, but his wolf does. Why do you think the beast calmed when you touched him? It wasn't just blood. It was recognition. A Voss wolf meeting its Ashenmore counterpart. The bond his father tried to forge, completed by accident in a bedroom. There's one more thing I need. Where did the old king keep her when she was here? Something almost human crossed Morin's expression. Lower level? East corridor. 3rd door past the armory. He paused. I never cleared the room. Some things are difficult to erase, even for practical men. I stood. Turned to leave. Miss Thane. His voice followed me. The wolves who killed the old king are commanded by General Aldris Varen. He's been hunting Ashenmore for 30 years, and he is very good at his work. I know. Do you know what the High Mediators could actually do? Not the calming. The real power? The ability that made the coalition decide an entire bloodline needed erasing? I waited. They could walk onto a battlefield and make every wolf stop fighting, not through force, through something worse, the removal of hierarchy itself. Imagine soldiers who can suddenly choose whether to obey. Imagine dominance, the fundamental organizing principle of every wolf society, simply switching off. That sounds like freedom. That sounds like the end of civilization as we've built it. Every structure is built on dominance hierarchies. Remove them and everything collapses. His eyes held mine. That's why they hunted you. Not because Ashenmore was dangerous. Because Ashenmore was destabilizing. Or liberating. Depends which end of the leash you're standing on. History is written by the side that survives, Miss Thane. Make sure it's yours. The The room was exactly where Morn had said, lower level, east corridor. Third door past the armory, sealed with an iron lock that Rorik broke with a single twist. Inside, dust. Years of it. Undisturbed, a bed, neatly made, a writing desk, a wooden chest containing folded clothes, simple, practical, sized for a woman preparing for a baby rather than for fashion. Dried herbs and glass jars, a small collection of books, and in the corner, beside the window where morning light would fall, a cradle, hand-built. The joinery was excellent, but not professional. The work of someone who knew how to use tools but didn't do it for a living. Someone who had taken time, care, who had measured and sanded and assembled each piece with the attention of a person building something for a child who hadn't arrived yet. The old king had built this, with his own hands, for a baby he would never meet. For me, I knelt beside the cradle, touched the smooth wood, rocked it gently, and listened to the faint creak of joints that had waited 23 years for someone to do that. There are moments that rearrange everything you thought you knew about yourself. Most of them are quiet. This one was silent. Just a woman kneeling beside a cradle in a dusty room, understanding for the first time that she had been loved before she was born, that someone had built a bed for her before she existed, that a king had held a gate and bled and died so that she could grow up somewhere safe enough to never know any of this. Brielle, Rorik's voice from the doorway, quiet. Are you? I'm fine. I wasn't fine. But the word did its job, which was to allow me to continue functioning while every assumption I'd ever made about my own history collapsed beneath me like ice on a warming river. On the desk, beneath the dust, I found two things. The first was a bundle of letters tied with cord. Correspondence between my mother, Ashara Vale, a name I was still learning to connect to the woman I remembered, and the old king. The letters were warm, careful, formal, but not distant. Two people building trust across a vast power differential, a mediator and a king, negotiating protection and finding something that looked remarkably like friendship. The second was a journal. My mother's handwriting. I recognized it from the few notes she'd left at home. Recipes and household instructions that my father had kept in a drawer because throwing away the handwriting of a dead woman felt like throwing away proof she'd existed. The journal contained instructions, how the mediator power worked, how to access it, what it cost. I read the passage about cost 3 times. The mediator's gift is not creation, it is removal. We do not generate calm. We remove the hierarchy that generates conflict. The cost is proportional to scale. 1 wolf, negligible. A room, exhaustion. A battlefield, dangerous. The body cannot sustain the output without training, and training requires years. I no longer have. If you are reading this, my daughter, you have not been trained. Using it at scale will drain everything you have. It may kill you. Use it only if there is no alternative, and if you use it, make sure someone is there to catch you when you fall. I closed the journal, held it against my chest. My mother had carried this knowledge across 20 years of hiding, had written it down so that the daughter she couldn't protect would at least be warned, had done the only thing a dead woman can do for her living child, leave instructions and hope. I allowed myself exactly 60 seconds of comprehensive emotional collapse. That's the budget. You spend it. You carry what you've learned into whatever comes next. Your father built me a cradle. I set it through the gap. 7 inches now. It had grown while I was in the lower levels, as though the door responded to rhythms I couldn't hear. Before I was born. Before my mother came to Dunhallow. She was here, Kylan, in the Citadel. Your father took her in, built a cradle with his own hands. My voice cracked. I let it. And then wolves came for her, and he held the gate while she ran, and he died. For her, for me. Silence. But a different quality. Charged, deep. The silence of someone processing something that touches bone. I was supposed to be born here, I whispered, in this citadel. This was supposed to be my home. From behind the door, a breath, ragged, uneven, the breathing of someone fighting to maintain composure and losing. I found letters, I continued, between my mother and your father. They had a pact, Ashenmore and Voss, protection, partnership. Press my palm flat against the door. This isn't blood chemistry, Colleen. This isn't a mechanism or a coincidence. Your father died for my mother. My mother spent her life hiding because of the time your father bought her. And 23 years later, their children found each other through a door gap, and the first thing your wolf did when it felt me was go quiet. Tears on my face. I didn't wipe them. That's not biology, that's a promise. Kept across 30 years by two people who are gone and two people who are just learning what they left behind. My grandmother used to say, "What's meant for you will find you, even if it has to walk through stone." She never knew how literal it would become. A wildflower pushing through fortress walls, a woman reaching through a gap in a door. Movement behind the door, not away, toward. I could feel the warmth of his presence through the oak. Then his hand came through the gap, not fingertips this time, his whole hand, open, extended, reaching for me with an intention that said the man was choosing this, not the wolf. I took it. We sat there, his hand in mine through the gap, me on the antechamber floor, him in the darkness of his chamber, connected through 7 inches of open space and 30 years of intertwined history. His thumb traced a circle on my palm, slow, purposeful, a new gesture, part of a language still being written. After a long time, 10 minutes, 20, I stopped counting. The door moved, opened, not 3 inches, not 7, all the way. Keelan stood in the doorway. The chamber behind him was different. The table, both repaired halves, joined by Jaren's careful work, sat in the center. Not against the wall, not shoved aside. In the center where a table belongs, where two people could sit across from each other and share a meal. He placed it there while I was in the lower levels, finding cradles and letters and the architecture of a destiny I'd never known about. While I was learning that I had been loved before I was born, he'd been up here arranging furniture, making a space, preparing a home for the woman who was already home but didn't know it yet. He looked at me, amber eyes with gold at the edges, the balance I'd come to understand as him. Integrated. The version of Kalen Voss that existed only when the man and the beast were in agreement. His hand came up, that trembling, careful gesture. His fingers touched my face. He didn't stop this time. He leaned forward, slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull back. His forehead touched mine. His breath mixed with mine. And then, with the tender care of a man who has thought about this moment for days and is terrified of getting it wrong, his lips met mine. Gentle, brief, almost tentative. The kiss of two people who understood, with painful clarity, that what they held was fragile enough to shatter and precious enough to be worth the risk. My mother used to read me a poem, only one, the same one, every night. I'd forgotten most of it, but one line survived. Love is not a shelter from the storm. Love is two people choosing to stand in the rain. We were standing in the rain, and it was the most beautiful place I'd ever been. When we broke apart, 3 seconds, maybe 4, the most important heartbeats of my life, his eyes had changed. Amber, pure amber, no gold at the edges, no wolf, just the man. For 3 heartbeats, I saw him, the real him, the person beneath the crown and the beast in the 11 months of isolation. A man with warm eyes and a scared expression and the faintest hint of a smile that he probably didn't know was there. Then the gold returned, gently, like a tide coming home, the wolf settling into its place rather than seizing control. But I'd seen him. For 3 heartbeats, I'd seen the man his father had raised before the wolf took everything. There you are, I whispered. The corner of his mouth lifted, barely, just enough. Here, he said. One word, rough, chosen, present, accounted for, not going anywhere. Well, I said, because my coping mechanisms are nothing if not reliable, that was worth 5 days of floor scrubbing and 2 bread rolls in carpenter fees. A sound from his chest, not a rumble, not a growl. A laugh, broken, brief, surprised out of him like something escaping from a place it had been locked away. The second laugh since I'd known him, and it hit harder than the kiss, because laughter requires something that kissing doesn't. Joy. For one moment, in a chamber with open doors and morning light and a table positioned like a declaration, the most feared wolf on the continent felt joy. And I decided, with the quiet certainty of a woman who has found the thing she didn't know she was searching for, that I would burn entire kingdoms to hear that sound again. The joy lasted 6 hours. Then the war council happened. The great hall, the same room where I'd scrubbed floors and been called a field mouse, was now a command center, maps on every surface. Troop positions marked with colored stones, the grim architecture of people preparing for something they hoped wouldn't come but knew would. Killin presided, not through speeches. The words were still expensive, still rationed, still delivered in fragments that made each one land like a stone dropped into still water. Through presence, through the weight of attention that made everyone orient toward him the way iron filings orient toward a magnet. Rorik delivered the intelligence. Eastern scouts confirmed General Aldris Varen's force was moving west, not 60 wolves, 300, an army, organized, led by a man who had spent 30 years perfecting the art of hunting things that didn't want to be found. They'd burned 4 settlements in the past week, 3 days from Dunhallow, 2 days beyond that, the Ironhold Citadel. The citadel can hold, Rorik said. These walls have stood for centuries. If we consolidate forces, Dunhallow. My voice cut across the tactical discussion. Every head turned. What happens to Dunhallow? Rorik's pause told me everything. The eastern settlements aren't defensible. If we pull forces east, we weaken the citadel. If we don't, my family is in Dunhallow. My father, my siblings, 90 wolves who have never raised a claw in combat. I understand, but the strategic priority is to sit behind 300-year-old walls while people burn. I looked around the room. A fortress that protects itself while its fields burn will starve before it falls. I don't know if that's a real military saying or if I invented it in the moment. It sounded true. Sometimes that's enough. I can stop this, I said. The room went quiet. The Ashenmoor mediators could walk onto a battlefield and end the fighting. My mother's journal describes the process. I can suppress the dominance hierarchy across a wide area, remove the chain of command holding Varen's army together. You've never done this, Margaret said from her corner. You've never consciously used the ability at all. Your effect on the Alpha has been passive, proximity-based, unconscious. Then I'll learn fast. The journal mentions a cost. I've read the cost section. Do you understand what it may kill you means in medical terms? Because I do, and I can tell you it means exactly what it says, not metaphorically, not as a dramatic warning, but as a clinical probability. Margaret, I appreciate the medical perspective, but the alternative is watching my family die from behind castle walls, and I'd rather risk dying on my feet than survive on my knees. Nobody spoke. That line landed heavier than I'd intended. Sometimes the truest things come out swinging. I'm going east, I said, to Dunhallow. Before Varen reaches it, if I can break his army's chain of command, 300 wolves without hierarchy are just 300 people making individual decisions. And most individuals, given the choice, don't choose violence. And if the ability doesn't work, Rorik asked, then I'll be in Dunhallow, and at least my family won't burn thinking I didn't try. I looked at Kalen, held his gaze. "Tell me not to go," I said quietly. "Tell me to stay behind walls and be safe, and I'll listen. I'll hate it and resent it, and hold it against you for an unreasonable length of time, but I'll listen." He held my gaze. The room waited. Maps and strategies faded into background noise while two people who had spent weeks communicating to objects in silence conducted the most important conversation of their lives through eye contact. Then he stood, looked at Rorik. "Prepare a force." The words came slowly, each one earned. "We march east, we?" Rorik's voice was careful. "I'm not sending her alone. Alpha, if you leave the Citadel, Tynan holds the Citadel." Tynan Voss, who had been standing against the far wall with the quiet discipline of a man who had challenged for this throne and lost, straightened. He looked at Callan and something passed between them that didn't require translation. The recognition that trust, once broken and rebuilt, holds differently than trust that was never tested. "You have my word," Tynan said. Tessa appeared at the war room door, red hair pinned up, pack slung over her shoulder. "I'm coming," she said. "Tessa, this isn't. Someone needs to make sure you both eat and negotiate with hostile field kitchens. Consider me essential personnel." She adjusted her pack. "Also, Dagna says, I'm quoting, if they're determined to get themselves killed, at least make sure the maid has clean socks. So I'm bringing extra socks. In the kingdom of wolves, the woman with the socks is queen. I'm claiming that as an original proverb. It deserves to be one. We marched at dawn. The Eastern Road was 3 days of tension strung between moments of impossible beauty, burned villages, empty settlements, the ash smell of communities that had existed for generations reduced to foundation stones and memory. Evidence of Varen's advance, systematic, thorough, the work of a man who destroyed methodically rather than passionately. And between the devastation, Kalen's hand finding mine while we walked, his shoulder against mine at the evening fire. A vocabulary of gestures I was learning to read. A hand on my back when terrain was rough, a touch on my jaw when I looked afraid, a way of positioning himself between me and the road ahead that communicated protection without a single syllable. On the second night, we camped in the ruins of someone's kitchen. The hearth still stood. Stone survives what wood cannot. I heated water over the remaining coals, found 2 cups that hadn't shattered, made something that could technically be called tea if you were generous about your definitions and forgiving about your expectations. Callan wrapped his hands around the cup, looked at it, looked at me. "You always bring me food." The words came slowly, but behind them, that rare flicker at the corner of his mouth. "Even in ruins, especially in ruins, that's when food matters most." We drank terrible tea in a burned kitchen while the smoke of someone else's life drifted around us, and it was somehow both the saddest and most intimate moment of the march. Because comfort isn't about the quality of what you're given, it's about the hands that give it to you when everything else is gone. Later that night, we passed the remains of a fully destroyed settlement, nothing but charred beams and stone foundations. Kalan stopped, stared. His eyes shifted, gold pressing forward, the wolf responding to territory violation. I took his hand. The gold receded. "Whoever did this has been doing it for 30 years, I said. "They killed your father to start it." He looked at me, those balanced eyes. "Won't finish." 2 words, a kingdom's worth of promise. Varen had spent 30 years making sure Ashenmore stayed dead. He was about to discover that dead and finished are very different words. On the 3rd morning, we reached Dunhello. My father was smaller than I remembered. Not physically. He was the same broad-shouldered farmer he'd always been, but the guilt had compressed something in him, made him occupy less space. He stood in the doorway of our house, the house I'd grown up in, the house where my mother had died. the house I'd been sold from, and looked at me with an expression that contained 22 years of fatherhood, 4 weeks of guilt, and the absolute inability to form any of it into words. I understood wordless men. I'd gotten quite good at them. "You look terrible," I said. "You look like a queen." "I look like someone who's been sleeping in a tent for 3 days, but I'll take the promotion." He glanced past me. Adsalan, who stood behind me with the quiet intensity of a man meeting his partner's father under circumstances approximately 40 times more complicated than that scenario typically warranted. "The Alpha King," my father said. "Kaelin." I reached back, took Kaelin's hand, drew him forward. "His name is Selen." My father looked at our joined hands, at Kaelin's face, back at the hands. "Does he talk? When it matters." Kaelin stepped forward, extended his free hand. The gesture was precise. A man who understood that this moment, however awkward, mattered to the woman standing between them. My father took the hand, shook it, and Kaelin spoke. Not fragments this time. Sentences, full sentences, pushed through with the visible effort of a man spending every word he'd been saving for weeks in one devastating investment. "She brings me food when I couldn't feed myself. She brought her own rations." He breathed, fought, found the words. "She talked to me through a door when everyone else was afraid." Each word a stone being placed, a bridge being built. Bravest person I've ever known. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of a farmer understanding that the man holding his daughter's hand had just spent more words in one moment than his recovering voice could comfortably afford. That the expenditure was deliberate. That it was, in its own way, the most expensive gift he could give. My father's eyes were wet. His grip on Kaelin's hand tightened. "Take care of her," he said. "She takes care of me." Kaelin paused. "That's how it works." I was crying, the messy kind. The kind where your nose runs and your face does things that would disqualify you from any formal portrait. My father was crying too, though he'd deny it to his grave. Some reunions aren't about forgiveness. They're about understanding that the people who hurt us sometimes did it carrying weights we couldn't see, making choices between terrible and worse. And that holding that knowledge without letting it poison you is the heaviest, most necessary work a heart can do. Varen arrived on the 4th morning. 300 wolves spread across the eastern horizon like a dark tide, formations that spoke of military discipline and long practice. At their center, a lean man in his 60s with white hair and the calm expression of someone arriving at work. General Aldris Varen, the man who had killed Kaelin's father, who had hunted my mother across a continent, who had spent 30 years making sure Ashenmore stayed dead. He rode to the edge of Dunhollow under a Parley flag. "I've come for the Ashenmore," he said. Measured, professional. "Surrender the woman. The settlement survives. The Alpha King returns unmolested. No further blood required." "No further blood," I said. "After 4 settlements burned. After 3 women destroyed by the isolation your purge created. After a king who lost his father and spent a year trapped inside his own wolf because the person who could have helped him was hidden in a farming village. Because you made her hide. The Ashenmore purge was sanctioned. The Ashenmore purge was murder dressed in committee language." My voice was steady. My hands were not. "You killed an entire people because their power threatened your hierarchy. And now you're here to finish the job on a woman who scrubs floors for a living." Varen regarded me with the expression of a man recalculating. "Your mother was offered the same choice, surrender. Submit. She refused. The old king died because of that refusal." Beside me, Kaelin went rigid. His hand found mine, gripped hard, restraint visible in every line of his body. "The old king died because he was brave enough to protect someone your coalition was too afraid to understand," I said. And bravery like that doesn't die with the man who carries it. It passes on. It grows roots, and it becomes the thing you can't burn out no matter how many villages you torch. You have until dawn, Varen said. Surrender, or we come through you. He rode back to his army, and Dunhallow held its breath. That night I read my mother's journal by firelight. To activate the suppression, reach for the frequency beneath speech. Every wolf communicates on it. The hierarchy is this frequency. To suppress it, become louder than the frequency, not with force, but with clarity. Imagine silence, true silence. The space where obedience used to live, emptied out. The nothing is the gift. The nothing is what choice sounds like. Tessa sat beside me, darning a sock. Because her commitment to foot-related maintenance apparently extended to active war zones. "Will it work?" she asked. "I don't know. My mother couldn't finish training me because she was dead, so I'm working from a journal and raw instinct, which is the Ashen Moor equivalent of performing surgery based on a pamphlet. Encouraging. Tessa, if something happens tomorrow. Nothing is happening to you tomorrow. I brought extra socks and I refuse to have carried them for nothing." She stabbed the sock with her needle for emphasis. "You're going to survive. Use your mysterious ancient power and come back and eat breakfast at that table. Because I didn't walk 3 days across burned countryside to watch my best friend die in a field. That's not how this story ends. That's not how logic works. That's exactly how love works. Love has beaten logic every single time since the beginning of the world, and I'll put my money on love." She looked at me, fierce, frightened, refusing to be anything other than exactly who she was. "So you do whatever you need to do tomorrow, and then you come back. Because people are waiting for you. People who carried extra socks across a continent for you. Don't make those socks meaningless, Brielle." I hugged her. She hugged back fiercely, and I felt her hand shaking against my shoulders. Some friendships are tested by distance or time or silence. Ours was tested by a 3-day march through burned villages toward an army that wanted to erase my bloodline. And it held. Like the table. Aelin found me later, sitting at the edge of camp, staring east toward Varen's fires. He sat beside me, close, shoulders touching. "Scared," he said, not a question. Terrified. "You?" He held his hand out, palm down. Trembling. "Same," I said. We sat in the kind of silence that doesn't need filling, the kind we'd built through weeks of door gaps and antechamber floors, the silence that says, "I'm here," and that's enough. After a long time, he reached into his coat, pulled something out, held it in his closed fist, deciding. Then he opened his hand. A wildflower. Small, pale purple. Growing season was wrong. Too cold. Too late. No reason for it to exist. He'd found one anyway. The way he always did. A weed surviving the impossible, brought to me because he wanted me to have something beautiful before the ugliness arrived. I pressed it between the pages of my mother's journal, beside the instructions for the power that might kill me. Beauty and danger between the same pages. That felt right. That felt like us. "If something happens tomorrow," I started. He put his finger against my lips, gently, stopping the sentence. "Together," he said. "Whatever happens." 1 word. 2 syllables. More than enough. Dawn came the color of iron. Varen's army advanced at first light. 300 wolves in formation, disciplined, controlled, operating under a dominance hierarchy refined over 30 years of hunting things that didn't want to be found. Our force, 50 wolves from the garrison, plus Dunhallow's defenders, formed a line at the settlement's edge, outnumbered 6 to 1. The math had the general demeanor of a physician delivering unfortunate news with practice calm. Kellan stood at center, fully shifted to combat readiness, claws extended, features sharpened, the hybrid state. His eyes were balanced, amber and gold, man and beast. He touched my face one more time, 2 fingers against my cheekbone. The gesture that had become his signature, everything he couldn't say compressed into the briefest possible contact. Then he turned to face the army. The charge began. Wolves hit wolves. The field dissolved into the organized chaos of close combat, claws and teeth, and the primal violence beneath every political structure. Our wolves fought well. Kaelin fought brilliantly. Tactical mind and primal power in concert, devastating and precise. But there were too many. I watched from behind the line, watched our wolves fall. Watched Tessa drag wounded fighters to cover with a strength that shouldn't have existed in a laundry worker. It was the strength of fury, of refusal, of a woman who had decided that people were going to survive today and was prepared to argue with the universe about it. I watched Kaelen take hits, a slash across his back, a blow to his injured knee, the same knee from the challenge, the one that never fully healed. He staggered, recovered, kept fighting. Then 6 wolves hit him simultaneously, coordinated, targeted. He took 2 down, 3, but the 4th caught his legs. The 5th drove him to the ground. The 6th pinned him, claws at his throat. His eyes blazed, gold surging, the wolf fighting for control, the man drowning. He was going down, and something in me, something that had been sleeping for 22 years, something that stirred the night I pressed my cheek to a stranger's chest and heard a heartbeat that sounded like home, woke up. I didn't think about the journal, didn't reach for frequencies or imagine silence. I just felt his heartbeat falter through the bond between us, and something inside me said no. Not him, not today. Not while I'm still breathing and carrying the blood of women who ended wars by walking between armies. I stepped onto the battlefield, and the world went quiet. Silence. Not the absence of sound, the absence of something deeper. The frequency beneath speech. The invisible architecture of command and submission and hierarchy that organizes every wolf's existence. I removed it. Every wolf on that field, 300 attackers, 50 defenders, Kaelen, the wolves pinning him, felt the dominance hierarchy simply switch off. Like a sound you've heard your entire life suddenly stopping, like gravity becoming optional. Like waking from a dream you didn't know you were having and discovering that the world is shaped differently than you were told. The fighting stopped, not because I commanded it, not because I forced submission, because the thing that made them fight, the chain of command, the biological imperative to obey, wasn't there anymore. For one moment, every wolf on that battlefield was just a person, standing in a field, free to choose. Varen's soldiers looked at each other, at their weapons, at the wolves they'd been trying to kill, at their general who suddenly had no dominant signal compelling obedience. Some put down their weapons, 20, 40, more. Wolves who had followed orders because hierarchy demanded it, discovering that without the demand, they didn't want to follow. Some picked weapons back up, because freedom includes the freedom to be terrible. That's the risk, and the honesty of genuine choice. But most didn't. Most stood in the silence and felt, for the first time in their lives, the extraordinary, terrifying, liberating weight of deciding for themselves. Nothing in my life had prepared me for how beautiful it was, or how frightening. Varen's army fractured, units scattered. Wolves fled, surrendered, dropped weapons, or stood motionless with expressions of stunned incomprehension. The chain of command that had held them together for 30 years dissolved in the space between one heartbeat and the next, and it was killing me. The cost hit like a wall, my vision darkening, my legs failing, my consciousness narrowing to a point of light surrounded by expanding darkness. I poured everything into the silence, everything I had, everything I was. The sky and the ground exchanged positions in a way that seemed structurally inadvisable. I fell. Arms caught me, familiar arms, strong, shaking, Salen's wolf had felt it too, the hierarchy vanishing, the dominance evaporating. But instead of confusion, his wolf had felt something else, relief, as though the pressure it had been fighting for its entire existence had released. As though the beast that had been drowning the man for 11 months had been drowning because the hierarchy demanded it, and without the demand it could finally stop. In the silence I'd created, the man and the wolf were equal. He held me against his chest, his heartbeat beneath my ear, the sound that had started everything. "Stay," he said. The word that began our story, whispered in the dark, the first sound he'd made in 11 months. But this time it wasn't the wolf reaching through a man's mouth for a word it barely understood. This was the man, fully present, using the one word that mattered. "Stay, Brielle, stay." I tried to answer. The darkness was closing, warm, heavy, seductive, offering the rest my body had earned, and my heart refused. I pressed closer, found the heartbeat, held onto it the way you hold a rope when the current wants to take you. "I'm staying," I thought. I always stay. The darkness took me, but the heartbeat didn't stop. I woke to honeycomb. The smell, golden, sweet, impossibly specific. The smell of the meal he prepared the first night I entered his chamber. The smell of a man who had raided his own food tray to feed a maid who cleaned his antechamber. I opened my eyes. The West Wing chamber. Sunlight through windows no longer shuttered, open wide, morning light flooding the room like someone had decided that darkness had occupied this space long enough and formally evicted it. The table sat in the center. The repaired table. Twice broken, twice repaired. The original scar from Kalen's candelabra clamps, and beside it, the cleaner line from Garen's professional work. 2 wounds, both held. On the table, breakfast, bread, dried fruit, honeycomb, arranged with the focused attention of someone who wanted the first thing I saw to be proof he'd been paying attention since the beginning, and a wildflower in a water glass. I sat up. My body protested comprehensively, every muscle, every joint, every cell filing formal objections to the experience of channeling ancient power through an untrained vessel. I felt like I'd been wrung out, hung to dry, and lightly trampled by something large and unapologetic. Kalen was beside the bed, sitting in a chair, not on the floor, not in a corner. A chair, like a person, watching me with eyes that were amber with gold at the edges, the permanent balance. How long? My voice sounded like it had been used to sand furniture. He held up 5 fingers. 5 days, he nodded. 5 days. 3 on the road back. I could smell the journey on his clothes, the dust and smoke and distance of carrying someone across a territory, and 2 in this bed. He brought me home. "You've been here the whole time?" Nod. "Did you eat?" A pause. He tilted his hands side to side. "Kalen, you cannot not eat for 5 days because I'm unconscious. We've discussed nutrition at length during mortal combat." The smile I collected like pressed flowers, the one that transformed his severe features into something approaching warmth. "Tessa made me." A pause, brought soup, threatened, consequences. "That sounds like Tessa. Is she?" "Fine. Arm bandaged. Angry at everything." "Also sounds like Tessa?" I looked around the room. Sunlight, open windows, the table with its 2 scars and its honeycomb. The man beside me, using words that cost him effort but which he paid willingly, gladly, as though speech had become something he valued precisely because it was expensive. "Did we win?" The tilted hand gesture. "Sort of." Vran's force scattered, half surrendered, half fled east. His jaw tightened. Varen escaped. He's still out there, with fewer wolves. But yes. He reached for my hand, held it. "Dunhallow is safe. Your family, safe." "And the Citadel?" Tynan held. A pause. "He sends regards." Tynan sends regards. His word, not mine. I laughed. It hurt. Everything hurt. But the sound came out anyway, because joy insists on existing even when every nerve ending has voted against it. Killen's grip tightened. His expression shifted, the smile fading into something deeper, more serious, more afraid. 5 days, he said. You were gone. 5 days. His voice cracked, not on a word but on the space between words where everything he couldn't say lived. 5 days of sitting beside a bed listening for a heartbeat the way I'd once listened for his. 5 days of not knowing. I'm here, I said. I stayed. You stayed. He lifted my hand, pressed it against his chest, over his heart. The same gesture I'd made weeks ago when I told him, this is steady when I'm here. That's real. His heart was calm, not the fragile, managed calm of early recovery. The real thing, earned through weeks of rebuilding and a kiss and a wildflower and 5 days of vigil beside a bed, choosing to sit and wait and trust that the woman who always came back would come back one more time. The table's holding, I said. He looked at it, at the 2 scars, at the breakfast. Twice, he said, twice broken, twice repaired. No more breaking. No more breaking. We ate breakfast together. In sunlight, at a table with 2 scars down its surface and honeycomb on a cloth, and a wildflower and a water glass. The door to the antechamber stood open, fully open. No gap, no question. Just an open door and the light coming through. I was home. The quiet lasted 3 days. 3 days of meals at the table, of sleeping beside him, of Tessa bringing blankets and Margaret monitoring vitals and Rorik delivering reports with the expression of a man who wanted to preserve this peace but couldn't. On the 3rd day, the reports caught up with us. Report 1, Varen had regrouped, fewer wolves, but the core remained loyal, moving south toward allies. Report 2, word of my power had spread across the continent. Every pack, every territory, every structure built on dominance had heard that an Ashenmoor could switch off hierarchy on a battlefield. Some were terrified, some fascinated. All wanted to know, could she do it again? Report 3 came from Tynan at the Citadel. A document from the reconstituted Elder Council sealed and stamped with weight I could feel before I read a word. Given the unprecedented bond between Alpha King Kylan Voss and the Ashenmoor mediator Brielle Thane, the Council recommends immediate formalization through the traditional bonding rite. However, the Ashenmoor bonding tradition differs from standard pact ceremony. The Ashenmoor rite requires the mediator to enter the Alpha's wolf, to go inside the beast and meet what lives there. To see the wolf truly, without hierarchy, without suppression, without mediator blood calming the surface. If the mediator survives what she finds, the bond is permanent and unbreakable. If she does not, the bond and the mediator are lost. I read it twice. Set it down. They want me to go inside your wolf. Kalen had read it over my shoulder. His body was rigid, his hand on the table, our table, white-knuckled. The wolf nearly destroyed me, he said carefully. 11 months. The beast is. He stopped. Searched. Not safe. Neither am I. I walked onto a battlefield and knocked out the dominant structure of 300 wolves. Safe has been my area of expertise for some time. This is different. Inside, you'd feel everything. Everything the wolf felt. 11 months of. He pressed his palms against his eyes. The gesture I knew meant the words were too vast for his recovering speech. Rage, isolation, darkness. All of it. I know. You might not come back. I know that too. Then why? Because 3 women died or broke trying to get close to you. Because your wolf destroyed them. And the only way to prove to the Council, to the continent, to you, that what we have isn't blood chemistry is to walk into the thing that destroyed them and come out the other side. He stared at me. Those amber and gold eyes holding everything his fragments couldn't carry. I don't need proof. Maybe not, but the continent does, and every pack wondering whether the Ashenmore is a weapon or a woman. They need to see the bond holds, that it's real, that it survives the wolf at its worst. You would go into the beast. For me, I fell asleep on a stranger's chest because I was too tired to be afraid. I talked about furniture during your death fight. I walked onto a battlefield and silenced 300 wolves. I squeezed his hand. Going inside your wolf is just the next door I walk through. The gap, he whispered. The gap. I've been walking through your gaps since day one, Celine. This is just the biggest one. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, the amber was brighter, the man fully present. If you go in, he said. The clearest, longest statement he'd spoken, each word placed with the care of someone building something that absolutely had to hold. And you find something terrible. Something that makes you afraid. Something that makes you want to leave. I won't leave. Promise me. I promise me. With the wildflower. I understood. The wildflower. The weed growing through stone. Our private language that no politics or bloodline or continental crisis could touch. I promise with the wildflower, I said. I promise, with the socks and the table and the 3-inch gap, and every morning I brought you breakfast through a door you kept open for me. I promise with everything we are and everything we've built and everything that's waiting for us on the other side of this. His forehead touched mine. His breath mixed with mine. Okay, he whispered. Okay. Through the windows, afternoon light was fading. Somewhere south, Varen gathered allies. Across the continent, packs chose sides. And in the bond between an Alpha King and the last Ashenmore, a wolf was waiting. Not the broken beast from 11 months ago. Something changed. By socks and wildflowers and a woman who talked about furniture during combat. Changed, but not tamed. Still wild. Still vast. Still dangerous. And I was going to walk into it. Not because I was brave. Because the gap had always been a question. Will you come back? And I had never once answered no. The table held. The door was open. And tomorrow I was walking through the biggest gap of all. She silenced a battlefield. She kissed the man behind the monster. She repaired a table twice because some things are worth fixing no matter how many times they break. But the wolf is still waiting. Not the wolf, she calmed with her blood. The wolf she has to face without it. If this story has given you anything across 3 parts, let it be this. The right person doesn't make it easy. The right person makes it worth the difficulty. The door is never fully closed. There's always a gap, and the bravest thing you can ever do is reach through it. A wildflower growing through stone isn't a miracle. It's a choice, made every single day, to keep growing when the ground says stop. And love. Real love, the kind that survives broken tables and broken trust and a beast that wants to swallow the world, isn't a feeling. It's a verb. It's breakfast, brought through a 3-inch gap. It's socks left outside a door. It's 2 hands meeting through the darkness, holding on and refusing to let go. Part 4 is the grand final. The last chapter. The last door. The moment Brielle walks into the beast and discovers what's been waiting for her since the night she fell asleep on a stranger's chest. Every gap, every wildflower, every pair of socks, every broken table repaired by stubborn, loving hands. It all leads here. Part 4, The Bond, drops tomorrow. This is how the story ends. You need to be there. Subscribe to Destined Hurts. Hit the notification bell. Share this with someone who needs to hear that love is worth the breaking.